Welcome back to an all-new episode of STEM Talk. STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. Today's episode is going to be about the technology in the schools district. Today we have on Mrs. Riemann. If you would like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Teresa Riemann. I'm the Director of Technology for the Livingston School District.
Awesome. So can you just tell us a little bit about the job and what it entails?
Sure. So basically what I do is oversee all the technology within the district and also try to create that vision of what we're going to need kind of moving forward.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what we do. There's a lot of technology in the district, so it's a bit challenging at times, but it's also exciting because we get to experiment with new tools and things.
It's probably a headache. A lot of technology.
Sometimes.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes.
So can you kind of tell us a little bit about when you started and what that journey was like? Because I know you said you started a little bit into COVID, so that must have been quite a hectic time. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I started in September of 2020. So when I came, the district was still, started off that school year with remote learning for both staff and students. So it was a little bit challenging. When I first got here, one of the other things, they had already purchased MacBooks for all the teachers. So that was one of the first things that we did was roll out those MacBooks to teachers to help them with the remote learning.
And that's this one,
they were
right?
doing. Yep, that's that one. So, and they also did that because of, they changed from Windows devices to Mac devices.
Right. And kind of around that area was obviously COVID. But before that time, you weren't there for that. But in 2019, there was a hack on the school, right?
Yes. In November 2019, the district had a ransomware attack, which kind of really impacted a lot of systems throughout the district and impacted learning and just the ability to use systems for actually, it took them a long time to recover from it.
Right.
So when I got here, one of the things that they did ask me to do is kind of analyze our infrastructure to see what we needed to change to improve our cybersecurity posture. And there was a report that had been done from a vendor with a lot of recommendations in it. So I started implementing those as well.
Yeah, so off of that, what were the biggest changes that you did have to make off of that information that you had about cybersecurity in the district?
So a lot of things that we did were a combination of hardware, software, and also just some policy changes. So for example, ensuring that everyone had a unique change their password on a regular basis. We implemented two-factor authentication for staff because the staff accounts and student accounts too, but really staff accounts are more of a target where they'll get phishing emails, and that's usually how they try to get into a network is through some type of phishing email. So having that two-factor authentication helps. We got a new firewall to improve, just a better overall protection. A new filtering system, a more advanced antivirus system. So those are types of some of the things that we've implemented.
Yeah. So I know obviously COVID kind of disrupted a lot, but just putting COVID to the side, all those changes, did you see that having a positive effect on the teachers and students, or was there a little backlash in the beginning? How was that changed like?
Yeah, so I think anytime you make a change, balancing security and usability is kind of tricky, right? So there's certain things that you have to do to make the infrastructure secure and try to make it as usable as possible. So I think that I don't think the staff have been great. They haven't been against any of the initiatives that we've done. I think because they lived through that experience and they know the risks that are associated with it. I mean, our goal is to protect not only their data but the student data as well. And so these are changes that are industry recognized. It's not like it's only our district that has to do these. And the other thing that we have to do is every year we purchase cybersecurity insurance. There's certain requirements that they expect from us as well that we have to implement.
Just something quite random, but off of that attack, did you see other schools in the area kind of be like, oh, you know what, maybe we should look into this also, even though it didn't happen to us?
I belong to a lot of groups with other directors and coordinators of technology in the state of New Jersey, and we're always talking about it. So unfortunately, education is quite a target because the resources are not as advanced as, say, a business would have. They don't have either the staff or the money to have like all the advanced systems.
Right.
So they've been, they really are a target. So, I mean, just recently in the paper, there's been 2 big school districts that have been hit in the last week. Yeah.
In this area or just like in the country?
In the state. So
Wow.
Monroe Schools and Hudson County School of Technology were 2, and it's just it's tough. No matter it's almost like you do whatever you can to protect it.
Right.
I think we know it could happen at any time. It's you just have to try to be as prepared as possible.
Yeah, and you do think we have made those precautions to be more prepared than we were in 2019, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's really cool. Obviously, that was a big event that happened, and then March 2020, we all know COVID. So even though you weren't there, do you know kind of what happened technology-wise during that March?
So so what I know is that they ripped apart all the carts of Chromebooks that they had at the elementary level. I mean, so from grades 6 through 12 were already one-to-one. So it was really just the elementary schools that they had to the K-5 students that they had to get devices to. But luckily enough, there was enough carts in the district of Chromebooks where they were able to dismantle those carts and give the devices to the students. So they were able, every student was able to get a device to be able to participate in remote learning. It was a bit of a struggle because the devices were old and aging throughout the district. So, both K through 12. And one of the things that we ran into with COVID was we had the money to order the devices, but the supply chain was just not functioning and the shipping was not happening. And so the delays, and when we ordered about 1,000 Chromebooks, they were delayed by 7 months. So.
Wow. So what happened during those 7 months? Did the students that didn't have Chromebooks have?
So they had them. It was just that we were piecing things together, literally. That some of them were just not in really good shape. Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. So obviously we have the one-to-one program where during COVID every student had a laptop, which I think is incredible to think about. During that time, besides getting the technology out to students, with the actual like software and stuff, what do you think the district's biggest emphasis was? Like on, was it that Zoom had to be the highest quality? Was it Schoology you guys started focusing more on? Was there like a certain software that the school started pushing more, you think?
I don't think there was any particular software that was being pushed more. I mean, I think really it was just trying to make sure that Zoom is a pretty reliable product. So it did work well. It was just difficult to manage, especially when we went into hybrid for the staff to have teach to the class and to Zoom at the same time. I think that was really challenging. But we didn't really push anything. It was whatever the teachers felt were comfortable to use with the students. This was what they did.
Yeah, and I know you did have right before the school got shut down, there was a huge meeting. You weren't there yet, but there was a huge meeting, I think, right?
Yes.
About, teaching all the staff how to use Zoom and stuff like that. So I'm assuming that's where, their voice, you heard what they wanted and stuff.
Yeah, and then at the beginning in September, at the beginning of the school year, they did a lot of training for staff too that wanted to come to learn about different programs that they might be able to use during remote instruction. Yeah,
so over the course of that time you joined and hybrid, so over the course of hybrid basically, I'm just curious, were there any problems or major dilemmas that you guys continued to run into that you eventually solved? Were there any, just solutions that you think were kind of creative or something?
I think the only major dilemma we kept having was with the devices. That was pretty stressful, and the only thing that we really tried to improve with that is just making sure we had parents could drop off the devices and get assistance at certain locations with a technician that was always there during the day, so that we could try to resolve and any issues with devices to get them back in the hands of the students. I would say that was, we just tried to be as responsive as possible to those types of issues.
That's cool. Yeah. So off of that, with that hybrid learning, when some students were at home and some students were in school, did the technology side of things, you think, adapt to that, or was it a slow process of, you know what, some students are now going to be on Zoom? Like, do you think that was like a slower process, or actually, let me ask you a better question. In hindsight, do you think there could have been things that the district could have done better moving from not only virtual or in-person to virtual, but also virtual to in-person?
No, I think they did the best with what they had. I think one of the things that helped when we had to do the hybrid was, while we gave the staff the Mac devices, they still had their old Microsoft Surface devices. And for that year, we let them keep them so that they could use the two devices. And I think that that was helpful, you know, for staff that had that. Unfortunately, some of the Surface devices weren't working anymore, but I think that was one thing that was a positive, is just trying to get staff to use, you know, the two devices. They said it was beneficial for them. Because they didn't want to give it up when we when we asked them when we transitioned back to in-person learning. But I think that we transitioned from remote to hybrid to in-person pretty well.
All right, and then just to kind of bring it full circle, do you think that there was a major risk of cybersecurity during COVID, since we just had that incident? Or do you think, again, the school district made sure that wasn't a problem? Because obviously everywhere was hectic. So I'm assuming.
So I still think that there were some risks because of the way some things were managed, and because the students still had Windows devices, which made it a little bit more difficult to manage when they were at home versus in school. So I think that there were still some challenges there. When we saw things come back from in-person, there were a lot of cybersecurity things that cropped up, like in our, in our antivirus system, and so then we would work to address those. So there's always a risk, no matter what you use, and it's just we've luckily been able to put more tools in place to hopefully identify it quicker.
All right, great, awesome. So that's the end of this segment.
January 2020, new year, new us. February 2020. On Tuesday, March 9th, 2020, school was closed for the day in case of an emergency. The teacher had to be taught online tools. Nobody thought something would happen. Then, March 13th, 2020, an instant Friday the 13th turned into one everyone would remember. It was our last day of in-person school. These 2 weeks turned into a year, which would turn into 3 years. Let's start from the beginning. Once we got online, our teachers had to adapt to their new learning environment, as did we. We all hopped on Zoom, used OneNote, printed out textbook pages and worksheets. With some good teachers and some good luck, we managed to succeed in the first year of online school. We were on FaceTimes with our friends, ate lunch in our kitchens, and spent way too much time with our family.
Welcome back. Now we're going to talk about the current state of the technology in the district. You ready to talk about that?
Yes.
All right.
Ready.
First question. So we talked a little bit about the one-to-one kind of process we have now, where every student's going to have a laptop. So juniors, I'm a junior.
Yes.
We have these Chromebooks.
Yes.
And I think the freshman class has these.
Yes.
All right. So how did it come to it that, like, how did they pick this type of Chromebook, and how did you guys move to this?
So this was the original pick for juniors as well, but because of supply chain issues that I talked about before, we could only get these.
Okay.
So that's why the sophomores, juniors, and seniors have the Dell devices, whereas the freshmen have the Acers. Every year what we do, because Chromebooks, there's new models of Chromebooks that come out every year.
Right.
So what we do is we evaluate the new models that come out. The reason the Acer was chosen initially is because, first of all, it has the embedded pen.
Yeah, I just want to say that's something that I do miss.
I know.
Yeah.
So, and that's really why we tried to get it, but we just, again, it was a supply chain thing. They told us it was going to be months before we could get them, and we were at such a stretch with what we had, what they just weren't functioning, that we had to choose the Dell because that was what was in stock. But so far, the Acers, and it looks like that for next year too, it's going to be a little bit of a higher model, same type, like it looks the same, just because the chipsets change, it'll be a different chipset, but that's really the device we're looking, one that has an embedded pen, because we know in grades 7 through 12 it's very important to have the pen for the writing,
or else you lose it,
and it's much easier to have it embedded in the device than have it separate.
For sure. So I know before, I don't know if it was before COVID, but a couple grades back, they had Surfaces, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, what made you guys switch to a Chromebook? Was it the cybersecurity, or were there other reasons?
So there were two reasons. The younger students that were coming up had been using Chromebooks.
Right.
So that was part of the reason, is because that was what they were used to.
That's a good
But a
point.
big part of it was the ransomware attack, and that's why the district decided to go in the direction of the Chromebooks, because the Chromebook is a more of a secure device.
Right.
It has the security built in, whereas with a Windows and a Mac, you have to do a lot of things to get them more secure than a Chromebook. And when we looked at, part of it's not just that, it's not just the security. When you look at what as a district we're doing, most of what we're using is web-based.
Okay.
And so really a Chromebook is all that is needed.
It's all web. Yeah.
Because if you're going to use any kind of advanced applications, it's probably going to be in a lab environment.
Yeah.
And not even if we were, and they're more affordable, honestly, than the Surfaces as well.
You get more for the smaller package, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about more web-based, and I think that kind of rolls into something that was really popular, which was OneNote,
Yes.
right? And now we're moving to something called Kami,
Right.
which is web-based, right?
Yes.
I didn't get that wrong. Okay.
Yep.
So can you tell us a little bit about that process and what both, how they're different from one another?
So we know that OneNote was heavily used, by the staff and the students, especially at the secondary level, and it had a lot of benefits. And when the district moved from the Windows devices, where you could install OneNote on it, to Chromebooks, the Chromebooks had an app.
Okay.
Microsoft stopped supporting that app
Right.
at the beginning of last year.
I saw that notification a lot on the computers.
Yeah, so we weren't expecting that, because initially when we moved to the Chromebooks, we were like, oh, this is okay, because it still runs OneNote.
Yeah.
And it's not as obviously as advanced as the OneNote application, but it met the needs for what we needed to
Right.
do. But once they started stopping it, we tried to use the web-based, there is a web-based
There is, yeah.
version of OneNote, but it's very unpredictable and,
Yeah.
and it doesn't work well. So what we started to do was research different alternatives. And Kami came up as the closest thing we could get to OneNote. There's no OneNote replacement,
Yeah.
and it was the closest that we could get to. And then when we saw how it integrated with Schoology, which is being used by a lot of the
Yeah.
secondary teachers as well, we kind of liked the way that it integrated together. And so that's
Yeah.
why we've been moving in that direction.
So how has that process been of trying to move teachers away from OneNote? Has it been have people struggled with it, or you think it's coming along nicely?
So I don't think it's a struggle to use the
Yeah.
program as much as it is to transition
Yeah.
material. So I think that's the most challenging
Yeah.
piece. And so what we're trying to do this year is what we're calling the transition year for
Yeah.
staff, to help them, provide them with training, and just time is really
Yeah.
a big thing to try to transition their stuff over into Kami.
Yeah, that makes sense. So obviously we just talked about how these Chromebooks have a little bit better cybersecurity and a little more lockdown. And something I'm interested in, and I know a lot of people are also, is maybe it's not the cybersecurity aspect, but when stuff is banned on the computers.
Filtering?
Filtering, yes,
Yes.
filtering, exactly.
Okay.
So can you tell us a little bit about what that process is? Because I know all students have a different opinion on it,
Yes.
but how do you guys come to all right, this is what we filter and this is what we don't?
So first I'll explain why we have to do filtering. So there's two main reasons we do filtering, and one is for a security reason,
Right.
because most of your filters are going to block sites that are known to be malicious. So that is one reason why, if you were even to have any kind of basic filtering, you would have it for that reason.
Right.
So the other reason is, as a district, we apply for what's called E-rate funding. So we get a percentage of money back for our internet costs. So we have to
Okay.
pay for our internet, and we get a certain percentage back.
Okay.
But part of that agreement is we have to have filtering in place for staff and students in order to get that funding back. So we have to
Okay.
comply with
Right.
regulations. And just because there is content that obviously students shouldn't be accessing at school.
Yeah.
But there's categories. So when you look at a filter, you can put in specific sites, or you can pick categories. So
Yeah.
there'll be a category for games. So then if you check off to block that, anything that's categorized as a game is going to get blocked. So I know.
Yeah, for sure.
Filters
Yeah.
are never 100%
Yeah.
because sometimes sites are not categorized
Yeah.
correctly. So what you might think is should be a legitimate site, it might be interpreted as the filter as not
Right.
being, a safe site, or it might fall under a wrong category,
Yeah.
which gets blocked. So, like, we try to, the teachers will tell us if they feel a site is
Yeah.
blocked and shouldn't be,
Yeah.
and then we evaluate it, we unblock it. But there are going to be things like games that we
Yeah.
block during the school day
Yeah,
because
it makes sense.
it's a bandwidth issue too, right? So and watching things like Netflix and stuff like
Yeah.
that, it has an impact on the network as a whole,
Right.
and that is part of the reason
Oh,
why.
I didn't even think of that. So having those applications being able to be used on the Chromebooks can actually hurt the overall system.
Yeah, if everybody's streaming a
Yeah.
video at the same time, it's definitely going to slow things down.
Yeah. So kind of off of that, YouTube, obviously a huge platform that teachers use, students use.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of different type of content. I know for a little while, I don't know if this is true or not, but YouTube videos were banned more commonly. And I think everyone in the school saw a shift toward less banning on YouTube. Is there like information behind that? Did that actually happen, or was that just everyone thought the same thing?
So I think you may have just seen it.
Yeah.
So YouTube is used for educational purposes, and so that's why we can't, block all of YouTube because it does have educational value. But we have to there are ways in which we can block certain videos if we find videos that might be deemed inappropriate. Luckily, you're not going to find a lot of that on YouTube because they do their own blocking when they find that kind of stuff. But there's still always a risk, and we just kind of we get feedback from students too about why is this blocked? Can you unblock it? And again, we just evaluate it, and if we feel it's safe and educationally appropriate, we'll unblock it.
No, that's really cool. I can't even comprehend how complicated that filtering system is. That's a lot of different devices and a lot of different web browsers and stuff. So that's really cool to talk about. Kind of moving away from that filtering and going back to the hardware. So teachers.
Yes.
We talked a little bit about this earlier in the episode and how they have the Macs. So what is different about the Macs and the Chromebooks that the school district thought teachers should have Macs?
So they wanted to give the teachers Macs because they wanted a lot of the staff use the full Microsoft Office suite. And so it'll run better on a Mac than it would. And there's other programs they use, like your art teachers will use the Adobe Creative Suite. So they'll install those programs on there so that they could do work, not have to be here in a lab to do the work. So they could run it off of that. So it was just more of a high-powered device as opposed to a Chromebook. And so we felt that as a teacher they needed that.
Yeah. And something else that I saw starting to be used similarly to the Macs of how teachers are kind of like, I guess it's a little different, the Macs they were given, but Vivi, I saw it in the past 2 years has started being used.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about that as something that teachers have started being used? What was that process like, and why did that even happen? Why is Vivi even being used?
So instead of having long cables come from the projector in the middle of the classroom, we tried to look for a wireless projection solution. And I guess in years previous they had tried a few that didn't work. So I had seen a vendor present on a few different vendors that offered the wireless projection, and Vivi was one of them. And they're relatively a new company, but they really do focus more on education and gearing it towards education, and that was what was appealing. So we decided to give that a try, and it's had its glitches, but
I definitely think. I mean, I remember when Vivi wouldn't work sometimes, or wouldn't work, every now and then. Since the start of the school year, I have not seen a lot of Vivi problems, which is kind of crazy to think about. Because last year I remember so many problems, but
we worked with them.
Good.
They gave us some suggestions on changes to make, and we made those changes, and it does seem to be working a lot better this year.
Yeah, you think it's being successful now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, Vivi's definitely awesome. I do miss the Ladybug though, but I guess that's more like just turning more virtual. The little Ladybug that
the
had
document
paper.
cameras. Yeah.
But now everything's online, so
Yes,
it's kind of crazy. All right, do you have any other last minute things to say? upcoming things that you could tell everyone is coming from a technology
Upcoming
aspect?
things, no, I mean, the only thing that we're planning is, again, you know, the goal is to keep replacing. What'll be nice is after next year, every student will have a more up-to-date device.
Right.
And we're on more of a plan where every 4 years, students will get a new device. So we won't run that risk anymore of having devices that really aren't usable, because we're going to be constantly refreshing them. Which I think is just a nice change to be able to have.
I think that's an awesome note to end off on. You know, everything's going to continue to change and continue to get even better. So that's awesome. I think that's all for today. I love learning about the technology in the school district. Awesome stuff. I'll see you next time.
Yeah.
So that was really good.
Okay.
That was awesome.
Just to feel the light of day. Had to open up my window, get the shadows out my way. Banana pancakes for my problems, find me jamming old Jack Johnson. Swear I heard them angel calls.